I wanted to talk about something today that has been on my mind for a while and was just brought back to my attention with a conversation with my son actually the other day. And it's the old saying that you may have heard of before. What will you say to your grandchildren when they come to you and ask you, why didn't you do anything to stop ... For example, in future years, if your grandchildren come up to you and say, why didn't you fight for our freedom? Why didn't you protect us from taking these things? Why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you go to protests or do something to push back against what was so obviously tyrannical behaviour, a tyrannical government across the globe? And for me, that's the last place that I want to be sitting in with no answer. If I'm blessed to have grandchildren, or even the children of friends, just children in the community that that are going through the stuff that they are now, because it's not an easy time to be a teenager and a child in this current climate. I don't want to be sitting there going, I don't know what to say. And I won't, because of the person that I've been the last few years, and I'm sure a lot of you watching this video are the same as well. Like, you've been very forthright in speaking your truth and calling out the BS and making sure that you protect your sovereignty and your children's sovereignty as well, as best as you can. But it's a big question to sit with, whether you're a grandfather or a grandmother, whether you're male or female. What have I done to try and advance my generation? Have I evolved or regressed my lineage, consciously and unconsciously as well? So that's what this video is going to unpack for you today. So we talk a lot about being an elder. And certainly in Indigenous cultures, that's a sacred space. It's a privilege to reach a certain age and then be regarded as someone that is a spokesperson in many cases for the tribe or the village. But an important thing to remember is that just because we are getting older, that we're aging, doesn't automatically make us an elder. So an elder in the traditional sense is somebody who carries the wisdom. They're a wisdom keeper, male or female. So they are holding the traditions true as the village, as humanity, as the culture moves forwards. And they're unwavering in that. You can't sway them. They can't be bought. They can't be coerced. They can't be feared into doing something that is going to threaten that privileged space that they have been charged with, that perhaps their soul has chosen as well. And unfortunately, we treat our elderly pretty abhorrently in white, modern Western culture. We don't respect them. We put them in nursing homes. We dismiss them. We get a bit bored, a bit short-tempered with them. A lot of people don't have time or don't make time for their aging parents and their grandparents if they're still with them. It's kind of like you pass this invisible use-by date and then suddenly you're not worthy anymore, or you're not valid, or you've got nothing to contribute, which is completely untrue, of course. And this is why I'm really encouraging people that have got elderly parents that are specifically chronically ill or have dementia as well, to get them to write down their memoirs, get them to write their stories, even if you have to help them, or they can speak it into a dictaphone and then you translate that. Get your family histories and your stories, all the dirt and all the good stuff, so that your family doesn't lose that history. And that is deliberately being erased by certain powers that were, let's call them that, and certain governmental influences to eradicate the people who are the wisdom keepers that can remind us of what happened last time we made that particular decision, for example. So the rite of passage that is perimenopause and menopause is when women in particular really start to feel this calling, this rising of knowledge and wisdom within themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of women have been conditioned and programmed to believe that this is when they're falling apart and that they're actually losing their power, and that they have no other choice but to rely on external supports, whether that's therapy, doctors, pharmaceuticals, all those sorts of things. And again, nothing could be further from the truth. This is when you're actually coming into your power, because you really have the opportunity now to sit with who you have become through life circumstances And it's always around the age where, if you have children, that they're pretty much self-sufficient. You don't have to be there 24/7 for them anymore. So there is more time for you to sit back and witness and tune into what it is that actually makes you happy. And with that, of course, comes a lot of memories around where you may have self-sacrificed, where you've obviously, of course, put your family first to nurture and grow them. Relationships as well. And the workplace is a classic example as well, where a lot of people feel obsolete because of the tech and the younger, more educated students coming through. So there's a lot of things that we get to sit with at this time in our life and to reflect back on where we made conscious choices, where we made unconscious choices. Do those choices still serve us, who we know ourselves to be? What is that creative spark or mission that your soul has always in the background kept reminding you has not been, even acknowledged sometimes and not completed? So it's a very powerful and potent time for women to start to reclaim their truth, essentially. So it's a very powerful time for women to reclaim their truth, essentially. And also, by doing that, to resolve whatever traumas and stories that are in their bloodline that are no longer serving them, their ancestors, and also their descendants. So there's a big piece of responsibility here, starting with self-responsibility, but then of course that infuses across the whole family dynamic. So I'd like to share a little bit about my story when I found myself, teetering on that precipice. And at the same time, I've told this story a few times. I was caring for my dad, who was very ill with cancer, and mum also with dementia. So I went through perimenopause, that rite of passage, at the same time, whilst seeing clients, whilst keeping a track on my son and looking after him. And essentially in that phase that I was at the time, thinking that I was trying to save the world, which of course is not possible. But I was in that space of just trying to make as positive a contribution to humanity as I could possibly. So out there sharing videos and talking about the truth and exposing some of the crazy stuff that's been going on, certainly since 2020. So there was a lot of energy depletion. There was a lot of confrontational energy, not just in the family dynamic with siblings and extended family, just being on different pages, which is just the way it is for so many of us. But also that sense of in myself of like, well, what am I actually really here to do? And the realization that when the patriarch or the matriarch are moving towards that transition themselves, how is their legacy going to be expressed through me? And we all carry different types of trauma and wounding, childhood dynamics and stories that some of them are good, some of them are not so great. So I remember the exact time that I had this epiphany, if you want to call it that. And it was when mum was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. And there's a lot of different expressions of what happens to the human brain under that umbrella of Alzheimer's. But she was diagnosed with dementia. And I remember sitting in the garden actually here and processing that, because like many of you who are obviously living and caring probably for parents and clients as well with this condition, there's a lot of like telltale signs that happen along the way for them being diagnosed. And I'm not a fan of diagnoses, as most of you probably know already, because it does tend to just put a limit on things, like a death knell in a way. And it's a label again, which too I'm very aware of not buying into. But for argument's sake, we'll just use it in this video today. And I remember sitting in the garden and all this emotional stuff came up for me, of course, and then a whole lot of memories from childhood and throughout my life of where I had recognized in myself that I was perpetuating some of the stories and the trauma of my mum. And that's very common, that's what we do. So I sat in this process in the garden, crying and recognizing that I was myself. I wasn't being diagnosed with anything, but I was doing a self-diagnosis of sorts, recognizing that I, at that age, was also at a choice point where I could determine to either become what I call the cranky crone or become the wise mage. And it didn't just happen in that one moment, of course. That was a reckoning and a realization of like the work that was ahead of me, which I started to do, and that took a few months in and amongst doing all the other things that I was doing. But I made a specific choice. And it was that I was going to put my staff in the earth and say, the trauma in my family line, as far as I am able to work with it, stops with me now. I'm not going to perpetuate the emotional stories, the baggage, the whatever that has been handed down to me. And that on some level I might have agreed to on some other soul level. And on other levels, depending on what your beliefs are, it might have just been like a Santa sack of crap just thrown at me when I got reincarnated. Who knows? It could be a combination of both of those. But I made a very concerted effort, is my point. And that changed not just my relationship and how I was perceiving what I was going through, but also my relationship with my mum. Because I was thinking, obviously on some level, that when mum either got to the stage where she couldn't remember who I was and who other family members were, or that she passed, that I would have all this, intense baggage to process and that I would explode. And all of it just dissolved away once I dropped into my heart and went into that deeper space of love, and also recognizing that I am a participant in this story and not just a victim, which was again part of the imprint that I'd inherited, and that we have all inherited in different ways as well: victim consciousness, slavery consciousness, those sorts of things. So I remember sitting with, I don't want to be like mum on one level, and yet I do, because like all humans, she's got amazing gifts and she's got her faults, and none of us are quote unquote perfect. So I sat in that alchemic space and made a conscious choice. And that was the first step for me. And there's been many steps since then, as it should be, because it's a journey. We're all works in progress. So I chose to be the wise mage, not the cranky crone. And again, of course, we have to be sympathetic, because our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents, of course, on both sides of the line, didn't have the tools that we have now and the awareness. And they had a lot of crazy stuff going on in their lifetimes as well, like war and famine and depressions and all sorts of really intense experiences. So we are kind of like very privileged now to have access to all the things that we do. But the message remains the same, that everybody, and there's usually one of you in the family, we're called the black sheep, and I like to say that we are the light sheep. We are the ones that are the gatekeepers, if you like, in a way, in a positive way, of recognizing, being able to recognize what that trauma is in the family, and then saying, no, I'm not going to allow that to keep living and perpetuating through me. Your siblings can do what they want, of course. Everybody else is on their own journey. So when you reach that point, particularly at midlife for women, where you determine that you're not going to continue in the same vein, then that's when the lineage and the trauma transforms. So ultimately, this is about remembering that you have the power to reclaim your voice and your truth, and to transform, as I always say, your wounding into your medicine. So it's time now to call upon your benevolent ancestors, because not all of our ancestors had their shit together, of course, as we're realizing and recognizing in this time and space now too. And again, that ties into, as I said at the beginning of this video, that not all elderly people are elders. They do have wisdom and gifts to share, but there's a difference. So now, as the menopausal mage, you have the opportunity to call in deeper reserves of courage, of patience, of tolerance, of wisdom, of course, of being able to be that one that just draws the line in the sand and says, no, we're not rubbing that out again. That is not correct behavior, young man, young woman. That's not how we do things. We all have that ability inside us. And that ties into being that elder that the rest of the family looks up to, the matriarch, the patriarch. The one who has seen enough shit in their lifetime and has moved through enough stuff and come out the other side, leaving a legacy of whatever is relevant to that family line, but more importantly, embodying the truth of who they are and becoming more sovereign. Not buying into all the crazy stuff that's going on around them because they've seen enough crazy stuff, and there's an aspect of their soul that goes, yeah, I've seen that before, I'm not doing that again. In this lifetime I'm talking about, as well as other ones, in whichever way you want to interpret that for you. Now, I work a lot with the Chinese medicine and the 5-element theory, and of course I want to bring that into this discussion as well, because it's kind of pertinent. In the 5-element wheel, there is a cycle called the controlling cycle, and that's the grandparent energy. And so energetically, and acupuncturists and people that work with TCM will understand this, when the grandparent energy is not there, the children, the parents and the children run wild. And when the grandparent energy is strong and it's creating firm boundaries, then the rest of the family unit feels contained. And for me, this relates to my dad passing at Christmas time and being the patriarch, the glue in the family, and was always the one with the steady, calm hand. He was the quintessential father and grandfather and great grandfather, and just always had a kind word and a very sane word to share with everybody. So the grandparent keeps the rest of the family in balance, on track, if you like, and harmonized. So that can be used energetically through things that I said, the therapies that I said, and the modalities, and also intentions. And it's a very powerful reminder that this archetype isn't just here in the 3D, it works energetically as well. So when we access and then temper our own grandparent, then we become that container, not just for ourselves and our children, but the rest of the family. That is the representation of those higher frequencies, if you want to call it that, of patience, of divine justice, of fairness, of resolving disputes, of giving as many viewpoints as possible so that there isn't a sense of favoritism or distortion of one side being more powerful or empowered than the other. There's a sense of equanimity, and that thread runs through the whole family because they're holding that strong and true. And they can do that because they've done their work on themselves. They've reached a point where, as I said before, they've seen enough, they've done enough, and they just know. There's this deep intrinsic knowing in them. And if you manage to get to that space, then when your grandchildren do come up to you, years down the track perhaps, and they say, well, why didn't you do this, that, and the next, or what were you doing at that time of history, grandma, grandpa, nana, whatever, papa, and you can hand on heart say, well, I did this. I saw through the crap. I spoke my truth. I contained and held my family strong in a sane, responsible, so being able to be responding to their own emotions and processing that in a safe container, so everybody stayed together as a family, that we weren't fragmented and fractured. And maybe some of that did happen as well, but ultimately I did what I felt that I needed to do. Or they might sit there and go, well, actually I didn't do much. I was too scared. I had too much trauma. I wasn't strong enough. I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the rest of the family behind me, whatever the reasons are with that. So you get my point of the importance of this precipice. And I'm talking for women's business in this video about really aligning yourself with who you know yourself to be at this time of transition. It's not just that your hormones are changing. Everything about you energetically, esoterically is shifting. And so many rites of passage follow before and also after this particular precipice, which we name perimenopause and menopause. And of course, the things that you have experienced in your life before that juncture and all the things that you've taken as far as pharmaceuticals, as far as medications, all the things that you've taken as far as relationship dramas, things that you've taken on board, things that you've absorbed, the way that you've nourished or not this body temple, all these things combine to create whatever sort of experience is necessary for you as an individual, as a soul in a human suit, to process and work with and transmute in this lifetime. So again, you can either evolve or regress your lineage. So if you want to learn more about this time and what is available to you, you can hop onto my website, dembishita.com, and have a look. There's lots of free information there, and you can also book a free call with me if you want to discuss your particular needs. But essentially the main message for this video today is to remind you that you are one of the grandmothers of the next generation, and that you have the potential, the ability and the birthright to embrace your grandmother energetic right now. I'll see you in the next video.